Okay, so I promised in the last video to do an analysis of the first degree tracing board. So here we go. Before we get into the symbols, however, let's just quickly recap how the tracing board works. The tracing board is a multi-symbolic representation of the path of the initiate. The new lodge member is to study the tracing board and decode the symbols, and these hold the wisdom needed to become a perfected being. Like I said previously, symbols contain hidden knowledge that without the correct keys appear just as visual objects. We all know the symbol of the sun and moon, for example, and for us they represent the hot, glowing orb that rises and sets, giving us daylight, and the mysterious but innocuous white orb that waxes and wanes, moves the tides and cycles every 28 days. In Masonic symbology, however, the sun and moon represent allegorical ideals to which the initiate should aspire to. For the record, many of the symbols on the tracing board can have multiple interpretations, depending on, for example, the type of Freemasonry, and of course other mystery schools may have their own takes on them. But nevertheless, the interpretation I'm going to give you is more or less a classic one, and so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The first thing to note is the tracing board as a whole. It has a tessellated border, 4 tassels at each corner and the 4 cardinal directions, although note that north is not at the top but on the left side of the board. The floor itself is checkered. Have you noticed how often that appears in the game? And this represents the earth or the checkered life of man. In other words, we have dark and light, day and night, good and evil, yin and yang, and so on. This we can think of as where the fool begins his journey, bumbling through life, a little unprepared for its trials and tribulations. On the floor itself there are 3 columns with the letters S, B and W. These stand for the strength the initiate will need, the beauty that he will adorn, and the wisdom he will contrive. Notice that, as we will see numerous times in this series, a tripartite concept. Do you remember in the previous episodes how we analysed the priestess card? To recall, the priestess in the tarot card sits between 2 columns and guards access to the Kabbalistic portal behind her. The 2 columns I mentioned symbolise Joachim and Boaz, or polar opposites, and so it is in this tracing board we have these exact same columns. The strength column being Joachim, which is the masculine principle, and the beauty column is Boaz, or the feminine principle. Psychologically, this polarization can also be thought of as the 2 hemispheres of the brain, but for now that is far beyond the remits of these essays. On the floor of the tracing board we also note Masonic tools, and obviously these are the tools that the Mason uses to craft imperfect stone into something more elaborate and of utility. It's interesting to note that there are 2 stone cubes or ashlars in the image, one imperfected and the other perfected. This again alludes to the stonemason's trade. We saw also a ladder with 3 beings on it, and these represent the 3 principal progressions or degrees that the initiate will aspire to. A perceptive person might also connect that in scholarship itself there are also 3 degrees from the undergraduate degree to a master's and finally PhD degree. And so the initiate will climb this ladder, metaphorically, until reaching the top, whereby we find 3 very significant symbols: the sun, the moon and a star, which is often depicted as well with the famous all-seeing eye. This star is called the blazing star and represents an enlightened being. The sun and moon here represent again male and female energies and qualities, but it's interesting to note that the blazing star is even more powerful than the sun itself. A truly enlightened being will have incredible powers, it seems. The sun, moon and star are also related to the 3 Abrahamic religions, and we should note that in Freemasonry any of these religions are acceptable as long as a person believes in God. The sun, for the record, represents Christianity, and this is because Christianity is a religion of sun worship. This is why Christians assign Sun Day as their sacred day. The The moon here represents Islam, and the star, represented by Saturn, stands for Judaism, which is why the two religions here assign Friday or Saturn Day as their sacred days. An interesting factoid here is that if we put the three together we get Isis, Ra and El, or in other words Israel, which as we know is traditionally the sacred place where all three religions are practiced, although today that balance is strongly in favour of the Jewish people. Ra, by the way, is the sun god, Isis the moon, and El the planet of Saturn. It should be clear at this juncture that the origins of Masonry are Babylonian, Assyrian and Egyptian, and we should recall the Egyptian obelisk I previously highlighted. So I mentioned the top of the card, or close to where Jacob's ladder points, is facing east. This is because the sun or light rises in the east, and so of course this is where enlightenment is to be found, in other words in the light. The west is where the checkered floor is situated, and so the unenlightened is existing in darkness, metaphorically speaking. We also have here the tessellated border that I previously mentioned, and this represents the planets that make up our solar system. The four tassels represent four qualities required for enlightenment, and these are prudence, fortitude, justice and temperance. And guess where else we will find these? Well, you guessed it, they are again represented in the tarot. So although I have again somewhat simplified my analysis, I think we have a good basic grasp of the complexities and symbolic principles as laid out in the first tracing board. Masonic law is a huge and complicated body of work, and of course I can't do it full justice here, but for now at least we have a few more puzzle pieces that fit into the game's narratives. For the record, it might also be worth me here clearing up a few confusions in relation to Masonry and the so-called Illuminati. The Illuminati, whether or not or to what extent they exist today, were a real secret society. Adam Weishaupt, a philosopher and professor, created the Order of the Illuminati in order to promote the doctrines of egalitarianism and democracy, based on a rationalistic and anti-monarchistic point of view. In doing so, he sought to remove power from the church and monarchy. The Illuminati, however, eventually became, predictably so, persecuted, and Weishaupt ordered his members to feign a dissolution of the group, although secretly they infiltrated Masonic lodges. On top of this, Weishaupt created and worked with publishing houses and snuck his doctrines into the public realm, albeit under the radar. Although a rational school of thought, it's prudent to note how much in current pop media it has a reputation of being some kind of satanic or at least elite organisation that pulls the strings of governments, financial institutions and programs our minds through Hollywood and the music industry. Whether and how much truth there is to this is up to you to find out for yourself, but in my experience human life is incredibly complex, and at best I find this a source of personal fascination, but not something I can state with any certainty. What is certain is that yes, the Illuminati existed, and may well still do so, and yes, some aspects of Freemasonry were infiltrated. I will leave judgment of my beliefs for the moment and urge you to do your own research. The reason that this is so complicated is that because of this infiltration into Masonry, there is no one school, so to speak, that we can analyse. But I hope at least you can see, through an analysis of the tracing board, that Masonic doctrine is far from anything satanic or nefarious. So, we will return to these musings again in future episodes. For now, I'll leave this discussion for another time. Whenever we see, and we will a lot, a checkered floor in the game, we'll know now that it's a Masonic symbol, and we know that it refers to the need for our hero to balance the black and white elements of life and tread a spiritually infused path if the universe is to be rebalanced and Jack become the enlightened hero. In the next video essay then, we'll meet Dr. Tenenbaum, in fact Jack's mother, and the next tarot card is also introduced. Jack is going to become father to the little girls in place of Ryan's big daddies, who, powerful as they are unable to give the girls ultimate salvation, as at best they can only keep them from physical harm and trapped in rapture. Thanks so much for watching. Episode 6, coming soon.